On the 28th of August, 1947, a multimillionaire and a bull killed each other and plunged an entire nation into deep mourning. The bull's name was Islero, and he was of the dreaded Miura strain. The man's name was Manuel Rodriguez Manolete, and he was considered the bravest and most skillful matador of modern times. Born in Cordoba, Spain in 1917, he was a frail, sickly child. His father, a second-rate torero, died when Manolete was very young, and the family was left hungry poor. Bullfighting is virtually the only way a poor boy can become rich in Spain, and Manolete resolved to become a great matador. His first attempts at the age of 13 were not promising. He was awkward and he was tossed by the calves many times. But he kept at it with a fierce determination. Hunger wounds worse than the bulls, the matadors say. Soon he was fighting in fairs and on second-rate programs, but more for comic relief than anything else. One critic described the ugly, skinny young man as looking like an undriven nail. Then one day when Manolete was 18 years old, Conrad spotted him. Once a matador himself, Conrad had taken to managing braver men than he when he found out that he himself was a coward in the ring. He saw that Manolete really had great talent, but that he was trying to do the wrong kind of passes for his build. Conrad took him under his wing. He taught him how to stand, how to walk into a ring, how to hold himself. He wouldn't let him practice anything but the classic passes, none of the fancy cape-twirling tricks and fakery that was so in vogue. Day after day, he made him practice the Veronica and the Media Veronica with the big cape. They were the only two passes he would ever do again with a capote. With the muleta, the small red flannel rag used in the last third of the fight, he was allowed to do the derechazo, the natural, the pase de pecho, and the pass of death. Only these was he allowed to practice with the mechanical bull and with the calves out on the ranches. Then Conrad launched his protege. Manolete was an overnight sensation, for never had the public seen such a pure classic style, such cold courage in front of a charging bull. They'd never seen a man plant his feet on the sand and then not move them back an inch as the bull's horns sliced by his body. The man would not dodge out of the bull's way. He would make it get out of his way by controlling it completely with his magic cape. Manolete proved that bullfighting is not the struggle between a man and a bull, but rather the struggle between a man and himself. He revolutionized the ancient art of tauromachy. He shot to the top of the bullfighting world, and for the next 10 years, he was the king of the bull rings. He was also the highest paid athlete who had ever lived, being paid as much as $35,000 for a single performance, and fighting as often as 93 times in one season. He became Spain's greatest hero. Over a dozen books were written about Manolete. Statues were erected to him. Poems and odes were composed, and a liqueur called Anís Manolete became popular overnight. 3 pasodobles were written to him, of which this is the most famous. Knight of the Sorrowful Countenance, they called him. Ugly in photographs, cold and hard in the arena, away from bullfighting, he was a gentle and magnetic and charming personality. By the time he was 30, he had made $4 million. His family didn't have to work anymore, and he had achieved all his boyhood dreams. But he was tired and scarred now. He was past his prime, and he wanted to retire to his ranch and raise bulls for younger men to fight. He wanted to get married. He wanted to enjoy the rewards he had risked his life so long for. He announced his retirement. But then, 3 months later, he came back. He had to come back. He had to come to the town of Linares in southern Spain to face the most terrible and most glorious day of his life. 3 days before, he had fought in San Sebastian, and his friend Carlos Arruza, the Mexican matador, went to see him in his hotel. To tell the truth, Arruza writes in his autobiography, I was shocked by his physical state. He'd been out on the town all night, and I wondered how he could possibly fight that afternoon. The Spanish public had been brutal to him for over a year now, even though he had just returned from the most sensational season in Mexico and Latin America that any matador had ever enjoyed. He was fighting as well as he ever had, but after a while audiences become infuriated by perfection. They kept demanding more and more of him with every fight. Out of boredom, they now wanted to destroy their once beloved idol. Manolete was too sincere an artist not to suffer under this treatment. I was worried, seeing his face even more tragic than ever, and knowing of his present bitterness toward life because of personal and professional reasons. He was just 30 years old, but he looked 45. I decided to stay for the fight, and Manolo did me the honor of asking me to watch it from down in the passageway. Once out in the ring, he quickly dispelled any fears I had about what shape he was in by putting up a highly capable demonstration, if not one of his really great ones. But he did many wonderful things that day, things that only another torero could really appreciate, that the crowd didn't even deign to applaud. As he came over to the fence to change muletas, I exclaimed, Caray, Manolo, what do they want? I know very well what they want, he said, and one of these afternoons, I just might give it to them to keep them happy. They took a photograph of us in the Cuadrilla gate, the last together. Then we said goodbye warmly, but with what seemed to me a certain sadness and nostalgia for the great days we had shared that would never come again. As he climbed into his car, still dressed in the suit of lights, he turned, and with that hint of a tragic smile that could break your heart, he said, Make them applaud their hands off in France, compadre. Then he set off, for he had engagements to fulfill. One special engagement was awaiting him, one terrible rendezvous in Linares from which he was not to return, and he hurried off to keep it almost eagerly, it seems to be now, as I look back on it. It was August 28th, and it was festival time in Linares. Manolete had said goodbye to his fiancée the day before. She never could bring herself to attend his fights, so rather than sit in a hotel room pacing and praying, she went off to Granada for the health baths. Besides, what was there to fear? Wasn't Manolete the maestro of maestros? He would surely show up this young Dominguin who had challenged his throne. Here was the real reason Manolete had been afraid not to keep on fighting bulls. Luis Miguel Dominguin, 21 years old, arrogant, cocky, skillful. He defied Manolete to meet him in the arena to determine which one was entitled to be called El Numero Uno, the number one. The public and the press whipped the rivalry into fury with great delight. Manolete had too much pride to turn down the challenge. All right, he agreed. He would show up this upstart in one final season and then retire for good. And in Linares, he would do it with the most feared bulls in Spain, the animals known as the bulls of death, the miuras. These animals have been bred for centuries on special ranches for just one purpose, to try to kill men in the arena. A fighting bull is the most terrible living instrument for killing that man has been able to devise, and these were the worst of the breed. Often they had fought among themselves, but they had never seen a dismounted man until the day came for the herdsmen to take them to the Plaza de Toros. The bull Islero went docilely enough into the corrals. He stood quietly detached while two other bulls tried to kill each other. Islero would wait and do his fighting in the ring. At noon, the officials and the representatives of the matadors came to the corrals in back of the Plaza de Toros to look over the animals. The biggest bulls and the ones with the most dangerous horns were paired off with the smaller ones. Their brand numbers were written on cigarette papers, dropped in a hat, and that was covered by another hat. The representatives of the matadors reached in with their hands and drew out the wadded papers. Islero would be the second of the two bulls Manolete would have to kill today. The bulls then were lured into separate stalls under the stands. Islero went down the tunnel fast and stayed quivering in the gloom of his stall, awaiting the fateful trumpet. The arena itself was empty now, except for two boys who played at bullfighting and dreamt of someday being second Manoletes. Outside in the crowded streets, the fair of San Agustin was in full progress. Normally, this town of 30,000 people is a typical, sleepy southern Spanish city. But the annual fair is the occasion for singing and dancing and processions. Every man, woman, and child in Linares wanted to see today's contest, but there were only 9,000 seats, and these had been sold long ago. At the sidewalk cafes, people discussed nothing else but today's corrida and wondered about the outcome. Many of the experts thought young Dominguin would show up the maestro. Maybe he would. Maybe he would. Back in the murkiness of his room in the Hotel Cervantes, Manolete had been resting fitfully until his manager, Camará, and his sword boy, Chimo, came to tell him that it was time to get ready. As he opened the blinds, the sword boy noticed a red mark on his matador's face. "Mosquito?" he asked. Manolete replied with a little smile, "A miura got to me sooner than I expected." Bullfighters generally do not eat the day of a fight so as to make things more convenient for the surgeons in case they are gored. But Manolete was not a strong man, and he needed to build up his strength for the ordeal facing him. He ate a small steak, some grapes, and a cup of coffee. After he had shaved, he began to get ready, starting by bandaging his feet. "I wish you could get some more of those stockings like the ones we found in Barcelona," he said. "These others bunch up and hurt my soles." A newspaper man from a New York magazine came in to interview him, and later Carnicerito, one of his banderilleros, arrived already dressed in uniform. "Why so soon?" Manolete grinned at him. "Going to get your portrait painted first?" The newspaper man said, "I've never seen you smile before. Why do you smile so seldom?" Manolete answered, "Senor, this business of the bulls is a very serious thing." The pigtail was clipped on, and Manolete said, "We'll be cutting this off pretty soon." The ceremony of removing the pigtail symbolizes the end of a matador's career. A photographer started to take his picture. "You'll get a handsomer torero if you take it after the fight," Manolete said. "Fear puts a mask on us now, and the resemblance doesn't go back into place until afterwards. Then he prayed to the little Virgin of the Macarena on his bureau. Virgen mia, please help me today. Don't let the horn snag me. Amen. The other bullfighters were dressing in their rooms, and friends and hangers-on began drifting in. Dominguin, as a sensational newcomer, had plenty of well-wishers. You'll show him up, they told him. You're the greatest matador in the world. If I get a decent bull today, I'll prove it once and for all, he said. Manolete is through. Manolete was almost dressed now. Chimo, he said to the sword boy, I want the dress cape with the roses. They always bring us luck. A friend said, haven't you shaved yet? Manolete replied, yes, I've shaved. And if it doesn't look like it, it's fear that's making the whiskers grow. The man said, I didn't know you knew what fear was. Manolete answered, my knees start to tremble when I first sign the contract, and they don't stop until the fight's over. Then it was time, the terrible time, the sick-making time. The crowds were beginning to head for the Plaza de Toros now, because a bullfight is the only thing in Spain which begins on time, and this was to be the most important bullfight Spain had ever seen. Some of the bullfighters went to the arena in carriages. The matadors, the stars of the show, went in automobiles. The arena was already jamming up with people who had come from all over Spain, and even Paris and London and New York for the event. Manolete stopped briefly to talk to friends. He was deep in the role now, and he could play the part of the calm, fearless matador that people expected. He posed briefly for the photographers, and then pushed his way through behind the stands. Some of the toreros went into the little chapel to pray. Others waited in the courtyard and smoked the last cigarette. Then the alguacil, the constable, rode up on his horse. He looked at his watch and announced with deadly calm, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't start this affair. Manolete took his place in the entrance gate with his helpers lined up behind him. Next to him was Dominguin, and on the other side was the third matador, Gitanillo de Triana. In front were the two constables on their horses. God be with you, cried an old vendor as the toreros strode out into the ring, followed by the picadors on their horses. The constables and then the toreros saluted the presidente of today's corrido. The sword boys hurriedly set up the capes and the muletas and the banderillas. The ring was cleared, and Gitanillo de Triana watched the Toril gate, because as senior matador he would have to fight the first bull. The bull had never been trained or tortured, yet it knew exactly why it was in this ring. It was here to fight, and it eagerly looked for something to kill. The crowd watched impatiently as Gitanillo caped the bull. He was just on the program to fill out the bill, and he knew as well as anyone else that no one had come to see him. He went through the ritual, however, and dispatched the animal as soon as possible. Then the trumpet sounded, and people rubbed their hands together in excited anticipation as the gate of fright swung open again and the second bull of the afternoon came running out of the dark tunnel. It's your bull, maestro, said Dominguin. Manolete didn't answer. He was too busy studying this animal's charge. It was a difficult bull with a cowardly charge, but he went out with it and gave it several superb, languid Veronicas with his feet flat on the sand. He never got out of the animal's way. He made it get out of his way. Then he ended with a half Veronica. Manolete requested the routine permission to kill the bull. Then he went out with the sword and the small muleta cape, and even though the bull was a difficult one, he managed to do a few fine passes with grace and elegance. But he soon saw that there was little to be done with it, and that it was time for the kill. He lined the bull up, then he plunged the sword between the shoulder blades, and the bull keeled over. Some of the crowd applauded as the bull was dragged out, but many booed. If it had been anyone else, they would have demanded that the Presidente award him an ear of the bull as a token of a good performance. But from the great Manolete, they demanded miracles. They keep demanding more and more from me, Manolete complained to his manager, and I have no more to give. Dominguin and his father were pleased. You can beat that, said the father. Just give me a decent bull, said Dominguin. That's all I ask. Dominguin quickly saw that the bull was a good one. He ran out into the ring and knelt down with a big cape spread in front of him. The bull charged. Dominguin swirled the cape over his shoulder and the bull's horn grazed his head. He stayed there on his knees and did some flashy farol passes, the cape blossoming out over his head on each of the bull's charges. Then it was time for the picadores. The bull charged the padded horse, and the picador pricked the hump of muscle on the bull's neck with his lance in order to weaken the neck muscles so that it would be right for the last third of the fight. To keep the bull from taking too much punishment, Dominguin lured it away from the horse with a series of spectacular gaonera passes, ending with a graceful serpentina pass that let the horn graze just a few inches by his legs. Then it was time for the banderillas. Dominguin decided to gain more applause by placing the sticks himself instead of letting his banderilleros do it. To begin the final phase of the fight, Dominguin decided to put his back up against the fence, a very dangerous position. Pass after graceful pass he did, and the crowd loved it. At one point in the fight, he had the bull under such control that he could kneel down in front of it, his back to the horns, with the confidence that it wouldn't charge at that moment. When it came time to kill, he did it well, going way in over the right horn and plunging the sword in up to the hilt. The crowd went wild. and he was awarded both ears of the dead bull for his flashy cape work and his skillful kill. The boy is good, Manolete acknowledged, even though this was not his idea of what bullfighting should be. He got the cape ready in his hands for his last bull. All right, let's see how he operates, said Manolete to one of his banderilleros. The banderillero went out and trailed his cape in front of the bull. Manolete's manager said, "It's a bad one, Manolo. It hooks terribly with its right horn. Kill it as soon as possible. Don't try anything fancy." But Manolete was out to show this crowd how a bull should be fought, and he started out by doing a series of perfect veronicas. Then the bull was lined up for the picadors. The picador went down hard. The bull leaped over the horse and was driving at the man when Manolete came to the rescue fast, shouting, "Ha ha, toro! Ha ha! Ha ha, torito!" He led the bull away and then showed the crowd 3 perfect passes, standing straight and gracefully. The fear he had spoken of was nowhere in evidence, as the horns barely missed his legs each time. He took the muleta and spread it wide with the sword and did 4 statuesque passes of death, calm and unmoving, his eyes heavy-lidded with disdain for a half a ton of bull. His honest classic style made them forget Dominguin's performance. Where Dominguin had worked 6 inches away from the horns, Manolete worked 2 inches away. Then it was time to kill. "Manolo, go off to the side," Manolete's manager warned as he saw Manolete starting to go straight in at the bull. It would have been easy to swerve off to the side and stab the bull in the lungs. It isn't very hard to kill a bull if you don't care how you do it. But Manolete had to finish this performance right. He had to give the animal a fair shot at him in the prescribed manner of the volo-pied style of killing. Straight over the right horn he flung himself. Inch by inch the sword went in up to the hilt in the bull's withers. But suddenly the bull flashed to the right and drove a horn deep into the man's groin. It hooked him again on the ground and flung him into the air. He lay crumpled on the ground, and his men lured the dying bull away. Then they gathered him up and rushed him to the infirmary. The first thing he asked was, "Did the bull die?" They answered, "Yes, maestro." "It died?" Manolete exclaimed. "It died and they didn't give me anything?" With tears streaming down his cheeks, his manager replied, "They gave you everything, Manolo. Both ears and the tail." Manolete smiled. Then he turned his head to the sword boy. "Chimo, the roses, they didn't bring us luck today. How my mother will suffer." He tried to sit up, but he fell back. Then Manolete said, "I can't feel anything in my left leg." The doctor assured him he'd be all right. "I can't feel anything in my other leg." Then he sat up and said, "Are my eyes open? I can't see." He fell back dead. Some of the newspapers devoted an entire issue to him. "Mató muriendo y murió matando," they said. He died killing, and he killed as he died. His funeral was one of the largest Spain has ever seen. Every Spaniard, whether a duke or a shoeshine boy, deeply felt that part of him and part of Spain had died with Manolete. So much so that they almost forgot that they had been the ones who had killed him. One of Manolete's banderilleros said as he looked at the grave, "They kept demanding more and more of him, and more was his life, so he gave it to them."